Hello, welcome back to the Cinch YouTube channel. Now this, if you haven't noticed, is the new Maserati Grecale, which is the car the brand is hoping to take on the Porsche Macan with. Now this is a very congested and popular segment in the UK, so this thing has its work cut out, but it does have quite a few interesting features and it should drive really nicely. We're going to find out in this video. But before we do that, if you haven't already, don't forget to get clucking on that subscribe button. Now we're starting with the GT model. This is the entry-level Grecale and it starts from £61,570, which is pretty pricey. Certainly it's more expensive than the equivalent Macan, but this thing does look very nice. I think up front it's got a lovely look. This GT model doesn't get the black trimmings you get on the Trofeo car. It's got a bit more chrome and it feels a bit more subtle. Now we will be driving the Trofeo model later in this video and you'll see on that car you've got a more butch design. It's slightly wider and the wheels are bigger as well, and the grille is slightly pushed out of the front to give it more muscle. All of the cars in this model range, they all look very, very pretty indeed, and they stand out a little bit more, dare I say it, than the Porsche Macan. Now, the entry-level engine in the Grecale range is this 2-litre 4-cylinder with mild hybrid technology. In the GT, it's got 300 horsepower, whereas in the Modena, which sits above it, you get an extra 30 horsepower. This car will still crack 0 to 62 miles per hour in about 5.7 seconds, so it's pretty nippy, although if you want power, of course, it's that Trofeo model with that Nettuno V6 engine shared with the MC20 supercar, which we've driven, by the way. Yeah, that thing will crack 62 miles an hour in under 4 seconds. Yep. But of course, far more people are going to be buying the cars with the 4 cylinders. So let's see how this thing goes down an English road. Now, behind the wheel of this GT model, in this car we don't have the adaptive dampers, the adjustable suspension you get on higher models or as an option, but you can see this car's been set to be quite comfortable. It rides nicely, not quite as nicely as its sister models from Alfa Romeo. The Giulia and the Stelvio are really, really supple. This is comfortable and definitely soaks up some big bumps, but I've noticed over some ridges and stuff, there's a slight thud through the platform, but it's definitely comfortable. Engine as well is really nice and refined. At low revs, it just trundles along. You've got enough torque for the gearbox to not be overworked, but it does kick down quite quickly if you do ask a bit more power from it. And with 3 drive modes, you can set it to be more responsive. So I've clicked from GT mode into Sport, and if I click into manual now and put my foot down, it's a smooth delivery of power. 5.7 seconds to 62 isn't gonna set your hair on fire, obviously, but when you actually rev it out, over 3,500 revs, it picks up quite nicely, and quite importantly, it sounds pretty nice as well. Hopefully you can hear this. It's quite smooth. And there's a bit of a snort from the exhaust as well, which is quite nice. It does sound sporty, but also not like it's trying to be overly in your face. If I click it back into a slightly more normal mode now, we can see there's also a comfort mode, but as I said, that doesn't adjust the suspension, it just slows down the accelerator's responses. So I'll leave it in GT, that's its natural setting. Steering on this car is weighted pretty nicely. It's not too heavy, but also not too light. It's quite reactive on the front. It doesn't feel darty like the Alfa Romeos, those sister models I mentioned. They're really pointy on the nose. This is slightly slower to respond. But then actually also I've noticed I do find myself making a few corrections here and there, especially over the bumps of this road. So there's a little bit of work to do. If I click it back into sport mode to give it a fighting chance, and I'll click it down a couple of gears. This road is rubbish and it's doing quite well actually of soaking up the bumps. Just tip it into this corner. Yeah, it feels really positive on the front actually, and interestingly I felt as I put my foot down around the corner, the all-wheel drive system, the front really pulled me around the bend. Didn't feel like it wanted to play, it hasn't got enough power for that I think, but it did definitely feel positive and quite nice. Bit of body roll, not super sporty, but it handles pretty well. Brake pedal as well, the brakes are nice and strong. I find that they're not overly responsive initially, which if you jump out of a car with really sensitive brake pedal feel, well this thing does feel a little bit slow actually respond, but then when you really stamp on the pedal, it's good. So it's nice and easy to control, and the gearbox with these shift paddles is quick enough. Not razor sharp quick, not as quick as the ones you get in a Porsche, but quick enough. There's probably a couple of tenths delay when you pull the paddle. The paddles themselves are really nice, classic Italian stuff. So yeah, it's pretty sporty feeling, but also not overly so. It's comfortable, but not the most comfortable car in this class. So all round, this GT does feel nice, but I reckon the models above it are going to be the ones to most pull at your heartstrings, that Trofeo included, which we're going to drive in just a moment. But first, let's take a closer look at this car's interior. Now inside the GT, it's a really nice interior. Despite this being the entry-level car, we've still got leather all over the seats and on the dash, and actually it just feels really well put together. Maserati has gone down the route of putting everything into the instrument cluster digital display and then also in the infotainment system. So you're actually short of buttons in the center console, although you do get a few crucial ones on the steering wheel. You've got your driver assistance features here and also media controls, and also your drive mode adjuster is also on here alongside the start button, which is quite nice and feels sporty. Now the infotainment system also features your climate control settings as well, which I'm not particularly a fan of because I much prefer having buttons. That said, this system works really well. It's fast to respond, and the graphics and everything in it, the media controls, it's all very nice indeed. And it's recognizable from the MC20 supercar, so you know it's going to be pretty good because that's an expensive machine. Also, this car's back seats have loads and loads of leg room because it's slightly longer than the Macan, and the boot is really generous as well. So as a practical offering, this thing is really, really strong. All right, it's Trofeo time. Oh, yeah, that is very, very different because we have a 3-litre V6 under the bonnet, then a 2.0 motor, which is also shared with the MC20 supercar, which we've driven and reviewed on our channel before. Now, this engine has over 500 horsepower in this car, so it will haul this four-wheel drive car from 0 to 62 in 3.8 seconds. And given that this thing is over 2 tons, that's pretty rapid. It's also very, very characterful. I mean, tremendous amounts of noise coming from up front and at the back. It's a really gruff and gravelly V6. And then the exhaust note, if you can hear, well, it's pretty aggressive, I'll be honest with you. Here we go. Oh, that powers up so nicely. It feels fast, and the brakes are really good as well. The brakes are bigger, of course, on this more powerful model, and they feel very, very strong. In fact, the brake pedal feel is better as well, I think. Now, I've got the car set straight away in sport mode because Trofeo, and this car actually comes as standard with air suspension, and that is actually why it rides so well, especially in comfort mode. It really smothers out the surface around you. The roads here are bumpy, and it just smooths them so nicely. It is stiffer in sport mode, but not too much so, and it just goes around corners really, really well. What I can feel and what carries over from the GT model we drove, and I don't doubt will be true in the Modena model, which is in the middle of these two, is that it's got a really positive front end. It reacts nice and quickly. Get on the power and you can feel the front of the car pulling you out. And now, because we've got a wider rear track in this Trofeo model and of course a lot more power, I actually can feel the back of the car really shoving me through the bend and out. Here's a corner, on the power. Yeah, we get a kick of power oversteer. So it really is very, very good. I mean, I guess there is quite a lot of similarity in the way the Alfa Romeo Stelvio goes down the road. That car shares many parts in the platform because this is a sister model from a sister brand. And yeah, you do feel kicks of oversteer. It really is very playful on throttle. That is lovely. And that was from low revs, 3,500 revs. This motor is really, really muscular low down. Now you can probably hear the camera being bashed around. This road is extremely bumpy, so I'm just going to soften off the suspension just to see if it can smooth it out. I can tell you it's fun. In fact, let's go back into comfort mode because it just is so good at smothering out the road. Here we're back into comfort. Engine's nice and relaxed now. The gearbox, I should say, changes really, really quickly. It does feel a little bit quicker with this motor. I can't tell if it's because of the tractability of the motor just makes this gearbox feel faster. They've tuned it differently, no doubt, as well. Quietens down nicely as well. We noticed when we were cruising along earlier, there's not really much in the way of road and wind noise given the size of this thing, and it just feels very easy to drive. Very torquey. Gearbox doesn't have to think too hard because there's so much range from this engine. If there's a negative, it's that it's over 100 grand. This car is expensive, and it's more expensive than its rivals. I mean, that includes the BMW X3M or the Jaguar F-Pace SVR. I think that engine does feel more monumental, but this is a very technically impressive motor. So yeah, if you've got the cash and you can justify spending a lot of money on an SUV, well, as I said in the GT, it's a very nice interior, it's comfortable. In this model now, with all the extra trimmings and the bits of carbon fiber you get on the Trofeo, it does feel lovely. Still not my favorite interior of the class, I would say, but it's definitely very, very nice indeed. And then the fact that it's quite playful on the limit, and it hides its mass when it needs to, and then otherwise it feels really sharp and quick. Yeah, it's a good car. It's a good car. I can't tell whether I prefer this to an F-Pace SVR, for example. I think that car is just so good. And the X3M is very, very impressive as well. But I must say, this Grecale is right up there with them. And that must be a big, big, big success for Maserati, given where they were, given where the brand was only a handful of, I was gonna say years, really months ago. For it to now be right up there, I think really bodes very well for the brand's success. All right, before we finish, let's get it into Corsa and let's do a start. Right, power down. Yep, that's very fast, and that was at 60, and it didn't feel like it was anything close to 4 seconds. Oh, what a silly, silly car. My God, it is good fun though. So that was a very brief go in the Trofeo, and well, it was brilliant. I loved how adjustable it was. I was so surprised how much it moved around on power. So I think it's safe to say I really, really like the Trofeo, and I quite like the GT. I think it's very expensive and its rivals do offer quite a lot more for the money, arguably. But having said that, these cars do tug at the heartstrings, so I'd understand if you're gonna go for one, especially if it's this beast. What do you think? Let us know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like it and of course subscribe if you haven't already. See you soon.